Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting. Full details of the questions submitted and the Mayor's written replies have been circulated and are on the Council's website. Groups have submitted their questions in priority order and are presented in rotating around the party groups. Each councillor can ask a maximum of 2 questions about one topic, or 2 separate questions about 2 different topics. Councillors have a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. We will now move to Labour question 1. Councillor Hickman, you have 1 supplementary question after the Mayor's response. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Marvin, for your response to my original question. I wanted to ask you another one, which is, it's about the worrying amount of misinformation around about the pandemic, and most recently regarding people doubting the safety of the vaccine. And I just wondered whether the council, or did you know what the government were trying to do to allay some of this misinformation, particularly on social media, because it's really concerning. I was particularly concerned about the ward that Hibak and I represent in Lawrence Hill, where there seems to be concern around this issue.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I've seen this flying around on social media, and I've been in a few forums, actually, when I've been sharing with people that we need people to read more books and less Facebooks, because that seems to be where the where some of the rumours are flying around. But we are pushing out through. We talked about this, a bit on our COVID group meeting that we have on Fridays as well. So we are with our, I think one of the key drivers, the key means that we're going to use to try and make sure people are more literate about COVID is through our community development team and that network of voluntary community sector organisations. So Sandra Meadows is on that call as well. We're also reaching out through the faith groups. Afsal's in the process of doing a piece of work on faith and environment anyway with the faith groups, but we'll take that opportunity that we were to reconvene the faith groups that we convened at the beginning of the COVID pandemic to look at excess deaths. We're reconvening those groups, Simon's calling them now, and we'll be talking to them about some of the misinformation and misunderstanding that there is as well, and ask them to work with their constituents. So we're really trying to get to that grassroots level, because people won't always trust it if we post it on Facebook, Twitter, because it comes from government sources.
Okay, thanks, Marvin. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'd now like to move to Conservative question 1. Councillor Weston, you have 2 supplementary questions.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. I hope you can hear me. And thank you to the Mayor for his response. I think he and I both share a deep desire for the elections to be held. Democracy needs to be constantly refilled. Some of my concerns, and I raised it at party group leaders, is I think a lot of attention is being focused on how to hold an election. And I'm not sure that it's about getting into the nitty-gritty of participating in an election. And I just wondered whether there was a way, possibly you might be willing, or cross-party, to work with us to flag up things like how do you collect nominations when you can't knock on doors. I think the Labour government in Wales has said there's 2 signatures needed, and it's things like that. I just wondered whether there was a way you might be able to feed in to the Electoral Commission to flag up the nitty-gritty of participating rather than hosting in elections.
That's a really good point, Mark, because I think actually that the mind has automatically gone to voters, getting them registered and making sure they're aware of the 3 ways of participating themselves through the proxy, personal vote, and postal voting as well. But Tim has taken these issues away already, but we'd be more than happy to talk with you about that. We do need an election in May. I agree. So we'd be more than happy to do some cross-party work, on that. But obviously, you'll know it will mean feeding that into the Electoral Commission, because obviously they will shape it. But let's do the feedback. I wonder too about sharing that with core cities, because there'll be a common challenge across all of us. So yeah, let's pick that up outside. That'd be great.
Okay, I have no more supplementaries. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to move to Green question 1. Councillor Comley, you have the opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Marvin, for your responses. My first supplementary is really to ask how people will be kept abreast of what's happening with the History Commission, because obviously I can come and ask you a member forum, but that's not a very efficient way of communicating. I'm just wondering, as it's a mayoral commission, will it be on the council website, the sort of alerts about what's happening with recruiting other members and telling people how to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, we'll put information on there alongside alongside the information on the other commissions. We'll be bringing them along to the city office as well, because there's we think, particularly as it relates to the culture board that we've set up under Lynn Barlow, that there'll be a heavy overlap. I would say though that one is, I mean, the people on it are connected. I mean, Dr. Sean Sobers, probably well known, community media. I made a film with Sean myself back in 2007 on Bristol slaving history. Interestingly, we did a piece to camera right next to the Colston statue and read out the plaque at the time. Madge Dresser's on it, David Olasuga, Nigel Costley from the TUC. And we had a really strong intervention earlier on from Dr. Joanna Birch-Brown, who has a philosophy background, but very much about public participation. So what they've been talking about is not history. And again, there's been some misunderstanding of this, some of it accidental, some of it not so accidental. But I'm not saying that's you, but I'm just saying it. But there has been a real strong emphasis on public history. How do you engage people in history? That is the whole point of the History Commission. It's not a bunch of academics going away and doing some research and presenting it. It's to engage the city in the fullness of the city's story. It might just take the opportunity just to share with you some of the way that I think Tim Cole, who's chairing it, whose actual academic background was in ghettoization and has actually done some work on memorialization in Germany off the back of that. So there's a strong track record there. He crafted a really interesting set of questions, I think, because this is departure point is Colston, but it's not the destination. It's not just about race, it's about Bristol's history, and race is a part of that history, but so is class, so is gender, sexuality. But he put questions like this, I think are really nice. Who or what have we remembered? That's the question for historians. And then by extension, what have we forgotten or what have we not remembered, accidentally or on purpose? How did we get here? What have we made, which talks about our economic history as well. How have we lived? What have we believed? And that throws open the door on all sorts of social movements, key moments in Bristol's history, conflict that have been driven by all sorts of drivers. So I think it's a really creative way, and they will be working to engage the city themselves very proactively.
Thank you. My second supplementary is a bit more nuts and bolts and a bit less vision. Is anyone getting paid, and who, how, and who by? I was just thinking about if we're getting people coming in, if we're trying to broaden involvement, will expenses be covered? Is that already happening? I just was trying to understand that.
Yeah. So away from the vision, which is obviously important, but down to the nuts and bolts, no one's being paid other than our officers, who will be supporting it. And John Finch and Fee are putting time into supporting the running of it, because we're asking them to do something. We don't want them to carry the administrative burden. We want them to focus on engaging in a practice of public history and storytelling.
Brilliant.
But
Thank
we
you.
are we are looking at how we can raise money for the History Commission, because there will be occasion in which they may want to do things that do cost money. If the city's contributed to that, then it makes it easier.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to move to Lib Dem question 1. Councillor Hopkins, you have the opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. On the first one, the consultation itself was quite seriously flawed in that it sought at the beginning to direct people away from what they wanted to, what views they wished to express, and partway through, when the public anger was starting to become apparent, there was a change in the tone of the questioning. Having said that, though, a lot of public money was actually spent on this consultation, and 1,800 people had bothered to reply. Do you not think it's a serious flaw that you're now in a position where you couldn't even share the results of that consultation with a working group that was set up to look at the future of the pool?
Consultations feeding into the cabinet paper on the future of that and our future leisure strategy.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Firstly, to comment, of course, it was set up by a motion of full council, not by cabinet. And I think it's disrespectful to full council that you failed to provide that response. Right, no councillors, so number 2, no councillors and Friends of Jubilee Pool were glad to get clear and factual information and communication from Parkwood that was in direct contrast to what actually came from the Mayor's spin machine. Can you now provide an adequate excuse to full council why you're refusing to publish the correspondence so that people can actually judge by themselves what the truth actually is?
Gary, look, I mean, if you come with serious politics, then, you know, I'll engage as I have on the first 3 questions. If it's just about the catastrophe, my dictatorial Stalinist, Pol Pot-ish tendencies and the rest of the hyperbole you normally engage in, then really it's not worth the time. What's happened is that, you were looking for a disaster. It hasn't happened. We held our nerve in the negotiations with the operator. As a result, rather than just throwing taxpayers' money at it, we got a good deal where all of the financial risk for the pool staying open is with the operator, not with a local authority, and the pool will open when it can. We did the deal at the right time, just like we held on over on the arena, just like we held on over on many other issues, and there's a solution. So I would say, celebrate the fact that there will be a pool and that the financial risk to the council is minimal, and move on rather than keep trying to find some kind of conspiracy or catastrophe that that you seem to live off of. But it's a disservice to Bristol politics. It's the demoralising approach that you've brought to the council over the last decade. It's really unfortunate. It's quite sad.
Well, I'm extremely glad that we stopped your
Gary, it's not a debate. Thank you very much. I'd now like to move to Labour, question 2. Councillor Breckles, you have the opportunity to ask one supplementary question. Thank you.
I think I have 2 because this is the only question I put in.
Did you put 1 question or 2 questions in?
1 question.
1 question, 1 supplementary. 2 questions, 2 supplementaries. That's the deal. So, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
So, right, well, okay, thanks, Marvin. 21.4 million is a significant shortfall and obviously owing to the government's failure to get COVID under control, our businesses remain in a very difficult situation, especially hospitality, which was only allowed to open for a week. So I hate to think how much food and drink had to be chucked out as a result of that. But as well as this, financial hardship is set to worsen thanks to the thin and inadequate Brexit deal, which puts a huge amount of bureaucratic burden on our businesses and is full of non-tariff barriers to trade that will exacerbate the financial problems of any businesses that trades with or has a supply chain with the EU. So how many jobs and businesses have been lost in Bristol because of the failure of the government to either adequately support Bristol over regarding COVID or Brexit?
I'll get this. I'll try and find a specific number of businesses, but our estimates now is about 8,000 jobs have disappeared from the city since the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown. So and yeah, I mean, Brexit wasn't you don't know what's going to come up, but we've weakened ourselves. So we've got 2 crises coming at the same time, and a Brexit deal that there were lots of promises that weren't properly aren't properly fulfilled and will be played out in the coming months. I think what we need to brace ourselves for is that the underlying drivers within the country in a moment will be a compounding of inequalities. Those who are furthest from the economy, those who are whose lives are most precariously balanced, will be hit first and hardest by any economic downturn, and then they will be least well placed to benefit from any upturn when it comes as well. And that comes off the back of 10 years of austerity, in which I classify, I mean, some others may differ, but I classify as disinvestment in our cities and a disinvestment in people's lives that's led them less resilient than they would have been otherwise. So it's a challenging time, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd now like to move on to Conservative question 2. Councillor Galandris, you have the opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Hello, Marvin, and thank you very much for your answers. I'm glad we agree on the excellent work undertaken by the Bristol Credit Union, even though I don't think we agree on the Avon Mutual Bank, I'm afraid. My first supplementary is this. When do you envisage the first loans being made available to Bristol residents by Avon Mutual Bank?
Yeah, we're waiting for them now, John, but let me chase them and get a sense of the timeline on that, and I'll be able to come back to you personally, if that's okay.
Thanks very much. The second supplementary, in order to trade, Avon Mutual Bank is going to require a lot more funding. How much more money are you willing to commit?
Yeah, we're not putting any more money in. It's an enabler investment at the front end.
That's comforting to hear. Thanks very much indeed, Marvin.
That's okay.
Thank you. I'd now like to move on to Green question 2. Councillor Clark, you have the opportunity to ask 1 supplementary question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your answer, Marvin. I mean, WECA are certainly key stakeholders in this decision, and they considered it important enough to put in a statement in support in the first place. So I suppose, let me try again. So will you ask WECA to reflect the position of the constituent authorities who were 2/3 against? And will you ask them, will you lobby them to object to the expansion plans?
What I'd say is that you are absolutely free to pursue the WECA administration, because bearing in mind we are the combined authority, which is one of the points I make. If you want to, and again, you know, I'll support you to do that, open the channels, though I'm sure you could do it directly. But my point is, though, that this decision, I know we tried to bring it to Bristol, say it's Bristol Airport, but it is not here. It's with the planning authority. So it's between the planning authority, the minister, and planning law, and that's where this sits right now. What I would just point out, though, is that you know, it needs to be understood as not just a single issue. It is not just a local issue, and I think that adds some complexity to it. But you know, I'm perfectly free to support you to make your case. You could raise it with scrutiny. Not that I never step into the territory of saying what scrutiny you should talk about. You could take any form you want to raise this with combined authority. I don't have to be a bottleneck on that for you. You could speak up to them directly.
You'll support that approach, though, will you?
I'll support you approaching whoever you want to, you know.
Thank you.
Approach.
You have one question, I believe. Thank you. I'd now like to move on to Lib Dem question 2. Councillor Negus, thank you. You have the opportunity to ask 1 supplementary question. Thank you.
For your answer, my question is really about where we were headed rather than where we are, because I know fairly well where we are, and your answers don't really match up with what I've had from the highways team. So my supplementary question is, would you please arrange for it to be put in writing what the likely protocols and the way forward we're going to be, so that we can get into a queue for prospective high street improvements, the living streets improvements, and give encouragement to those people who are very keen to see this happen in the local area?
Sure, we can bring it in. We're working on a list at the moment. We're happy to add you to that. But the preliminary work on what goes on into a livable neighbourhood, you're absolutely free to start the groundwork on that and get things ready for as and when you're moving up through that list. There's obviously an issue of capacity with a local authority. It's not just nothing we want to do is just about political will. It's also about financial resource and personnel and the well-being of our staff. That we work very hard quite often in the organisation, as you'll probably be aware. Happy to arrange a conversation, do the preliminary work, and let's get things moving.
That's much more encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to move on to Labour question 3. Councillor Kirk, you have one supplementary question. Thank you. Is Councillor Kirk here? Doesn't look like she is. Okay, I'll now like to move on to Conservative question 3. Councillor Hiscox, you have 2 supplementary questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I ask, Marvin, when was the last time you personally raised the issue of the new school with a minister, and how you are using your political levers to progress the essential new school?
Yeah, we wrote in November.
And that was, you just wrote. Have you had a response? No, I'm not going to ask that question because that would be my second. My second question is, at one point, land around the former Arena Island was considered as possibly suitable for a school. Can you explain why this was discounted?
Yeah, could you say that again, please?
Yes, at one point, land around the former Arena Island was considered as possibly suitable for a school. Can you explain why this piece of land was discounted?
There's an additional financial consequence to the city through that, because it would take up land that we could possibly get our business rates from as well. So, and we'd retain those. So that's, that would be a consideration. But we'd have to, I'll go back in and look at some of the more detailed considerations that happened in and around specific pieces of land as well that ended up with the land alongside the river being identified.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to move to Green question 3. Is Councillor Bolton in attendance? Can we see him? No. Do we have Councillor Wright here as well? No. Okay, we'll move on to Labour question 4. Councillor Alexander, you have the opportunity for one supplementary question. Thank you.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and thanks, Marvin, for your answer. Regarding the government's freeze of public sector pay, leaving aside any moral outrage we might feel about freezing people's pay, the pay of key workers during a pandemic, don't you feel it's economically counterproductive to freeze the pay of people who would be out in our city stimulating the economy and spending it in businesses if they only had it?
Well, certainly in line with the pay freeze I was subject to when I was in the NHS as well. That we know it takes money out of the economy, particularly for people in the lower pay bands who tend to spend their money and then spend it in local businesses. So I think by definition, yes, as well as being a demotivator for people who have really been putting in the efforts on the front line, have no alternative other than to continue working. So I don't think it's necessarily a wise move, particularly when we've heard of some of the people who've made out pretty financially nicely by getting contracts from the government actually for providing PPE and the rest of it. So yeah, it's not a good look.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to move on to Conservative question 4. Councillor Eddy, you have the opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions. Thank you.
Mayor, it strikes me that this plan is more about shoring up Bristol Waste than improving cleaning, security, maintaining decent working conditions. Will you detail, please, the responses received from the unions and our existing outside customers in these services?
Well, it's not, Councillor Eddy. Obviously, there are a whole number of things moving around at the same time. One is, the council's financial circumstances, the working conditions of staff. This is a council-owned company, so it's not, outsourcing; it's co-sourcing. It is great to hear you speaking up for workers' interests and being concerned about workers, moving around and potentially a smaller local government in and of itself. But Bristol Waste is an upstanding company. It's ours, and it's great for them to be there. And we foresee a future in which they are believing that they can make some major savings for us. It is also, in terms of Bristol Waste as well, the company, it's good for the company to do well. It's not shoring it up, it's doing well as a company, and it's key to our commitment to tidying up Bristol, reducing the generation of waste, more efficiently processing waste, and making sure that we either recycle or turn waste into energy at the other end. So there are lots of things we're trying to deliver on at the same time.
I note the worker champion did not list the union's concerns, but there we are. On what basis does Bristol Waste demonstrate experience or capability with managing these services, please?
Well, we've had a good experience. I mean, I'm chuffed about the quality of your relationship with the unions now. We have we have ongoing conversations with the unions. No formal responses yet. Obviously, some people raise concerns because it's changed, but we've really always prioritized the well-being of our staff. It fits in line with our approach to the staff in general. Is to take care of them. Reintroducing the annual staff survey that hadn't happened for about 5 years when we went in any consistent way when we came in, introducing staff training, well-being that a number of the staff are feeding back on. What we are doing with the staff that will be moving to Bristol Waste will be absolutely in line with the values that we've brought to the staff who remain directly employed by the City Council. It's about looking out for their well-being and their welfare.
Thank you. I'd now like to move on to Lib Dem question 4. Councillor Kent, you have the opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the answers, Mayor Rees. First supplementary, would you agree that the proposed maintenance budget, which is basically about less than £1,000 per play park, is just simply not enough when we come to investing in our children's play area?
We'd always like to have more available, but we face challenging financial times. I'm not going to go into the Liberal Conservative Coalition, but we've been off the back of 10 years of austerity. That's hit us on all fronts. And even when we had the cross-party cabinet, we had cabinet members from other parties taking on briefs dealing with the challenges of that. To talk about spending of Bristol City Council and your desire to have more spending without talking to the financial context in which we have to operate is a little bit problematic, can I suggest?
Thanks for that answer. That's really useful. I'll go to my supplementary 2, which is on the same question. I agree with you on that. You're precisely right. I mean, personally, I would have left the politics out, and so I wouldn't have brought up Bristol Energy and you having wasted £50 million of taxpayers' money on that, which we could, of course, put into children's play areas. If we'd just taken 28 days of how much you spent on Bristol Energy, that would have given £1 million that we could invest in children's play areas. But putting that aside, because I want to talk about children's play areas and not the politics of it. Would you be willing to sort of help back campaigns which are sort of out there trying to look for investment into children's play? COVID's particularly hit young children hard. And so I'm thinking, you know, can we get the City Council behind campaigns to see if we can attract in extra money to deal with the massive backlog which exists in dealing with making sure our play parks are up to scratch? Thank you.
Yeah, well, this, you know, we can't take spending decisions away from politics because they are political. Talking about how we understand the country, how it runs, and who's in charge, and what their philosophy is. So, you know, it's just part of understanding the world. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I could see your shoehorn of Bristol Energy. Obviously, there's a lot of flamboyance in your answers and all that. The truth is, we made a responsible decision with the company that we inherited. But we think green spaces are critical to children's well-being. Ruth Pickersgill and Helen have been ferocious champions of children's play and making sure we have play strategies within the city. And we want our spaces to be, you know, as top quality and as well kept and as safe as possible. But we meet that challenge alongside all the other challenges we face in the city, you know, alongside building houses, investing in children's mental health and well-being directly, spending money on domestic violence, street safety, and all the 1,001 other things that we have to do. So it's a critically important area alongside all the other critical areas that we take responsibility for.
Thank you. I'd now like to move to Conservative question 5. That's Councillor Quarterly. You have the opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions, Councillor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and obviously thank you, Mayor, for your written answers. I'm well aware that the Green Belt is not a nature conservation policy. Yew Tree Farm within our present Green Belt is Bristol's last working farm and a model of sustainable local food production. Is it not really worth trying to save?
Well, as I said in my answer, you know, I visited it myself, and certainly, you know, for the passion of the current tenants there, you know, and saw the farm is a very special place. As I said, you know, we're coming up to review the local plan. We can have a, you know, a look at the designation there, but there's the fundamental problem is there's a landowner and they have an intention for the land that, and it's their land. It's one of those situations again. But what I would also just ask you, Councillor Quarterly, is since we started building homes in Bristol, we have been on the receiving end of a number of campaigns not to build homes. Right? We agree there's a housing crisis, then whether it's Hengrove or whether it's Western Harbour. So if we are gonna, I would just ask, and this is not a contest with you, but I'm just going to say, whenever we step up and say we don't want homes built in place A, please suggest place B where they would go, because if we do need to build homes, I'm on the Archbishop of Canterbury's Housing Commission. We met today. We are talking about the housing crisis and the many social, health, environmental consequences that come from that crisis. So it'd be great. You don't want stuff on Greenbelt. We can have a discussion about that. But then start talking about the central sites, the edge of Council Park that we're building homes, the Western Harbour for more dense city centre, active travel zone developments as well. So please, suggest some alternatives to when proposed or possible schemes are being opposed as well. That'd be, I think, that would be worthy of the council chamber and the elected members.
Okay, thank you. And my second supplementary one, I do welcome, obviously, the Mayor's olive branch, which suggests that council could yet still delete the redevelopment of Yew Tree Farm. Catherine Withers, as we know, who runs the farm, emailed your office, I believe, over the last few days to update you on the recent sustainable development action. What I'm looking for, though, will you be able to commit to revisiting Yew Tree Farm within 2021? Would that be a possibility?
Oh yeah, well, we said we'd have a look at it. I mean, these questions are active all the time. What I won't commit to is a conclusion on that, but I commit to being open and looking for solutions. And if if there's a possibility of saving it in a way that helps us meet all our city challenges, then we should. Well, I would add, Kevin, it's worth familiarising yourselves with the Sustainable Development Goals as well, if you get a chance. Very useful, because we have, alongside our desire to deliver housing, one is the ecological strategy, but also we are really looking at how we can look at the wider systems on which the city depends and their impact on the planet. One of those is food. So growing locally sourced food that is nutritious, that is free of chemicals, and the rest of it is actually part of our desire. So it is perfectly within scope that the role that the farm plays in helping us with our locally sourced food supply fits within our city goals. But the world is never straightforward, is it? And sometimes there are things that aren't available to us, even if we desire to have them. But we certainly will keep the conversation alive and welcome having that with you.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to move to Lib Dem question 5. Councillor Negus, you have the opportunity to ask one supplementary question. Thank you very much. Councillor Negus, you need to unmute yourself. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm happy to debate the benefits of the Liberal Democrat contribution to the coalition any day of the week you want. So bring it on whenever you feel like it. But my question relates to the difference in policy that you've expressed about the use of the Avon Pension Fund with that of the largest council in Britain, Birmingham, who have in fact taken a completely different view to you and are using this money for rolling it out for beneficial use for building social housing, which is what I proposed. And I'm very surprised that you don't feel that this is appropriate or possible, and they do. Have you spoken to them about that?
No, it's not something I've spoken to Birmingham about. But I will say, I'll leave it. No, I haven't spoken to him, Councillor Negus, no.
Okay, I'll have to settle for that then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'd now like to move to Conservative question 6. Councillor Smith, you have the opportunity to ask one supplementary question. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Marvin, for your response there. That certainly clarifies the situation I had. I think many people have misunderstood that. It's not entirely reassuring, though, given we've had the reports yesterday about the extent of the losses from the business, and it isn't clear whether the council will get back any of the 37 million it's put in. Now, you and I will obviously have different views on what went wrong, and I don't intend to get into that argument today because it doesn't get us anywhere. So my supplementary is it your view that an independent external report of some sort into what's happened here would be a good thing? And if so, when would you like to see that published? Thank you.
Steve, I think that's why I invited them to do so. All right, they haven't approached us about it. We've approached them about the independent review. That's the point I made about the misunderstanding, because I think some people had interpreted it, would like to interpret it, or have communicated it as though they have come to us suggesting this. That's not the case. There's been so much hyperbole and misinformation put out there, and actually, to be honest, convenient shortchanging of the story. Again, one of the points we've made, Councillor Smith, is that this was a company that was set up before we came in by a cross-party cabinet with a finance lead from your own party, with a business plan that said this was being the most profitable energy company in the UK. Just months before we came in, we pick up this, we got the tiger by the tail. You've got to try and make sense of that. You've got to try and manage a business in the energy sector, which is a very expensive sector to be in, and work out why this business plan wasn't stacking up, and that reveals itself to you, and then try and make the best of the situation for the authority. The numbers become high because it's the energy business. If we were selling pot plants, it would not be big numbers, but it's not. It was the energy business that we were put into by the previous administration. And that's the unfortunate challenge, along with some other financial challenges that we were left in, such as the arena and the basic state of the council's finances. So we've invited that company in to undertake the review, just to start at the beginning, work through and forensic go through and put the truth out there, so it's not subject to party political opportunism and ping pong.
Thank you. I'd now like to move on to Lib Dem question 6. I don't think we have Councillor Davis here. I will now move on to Conservative question 7. Councillor Morris, I don't think is in the room either. So I'd now like to move on to Conservative question 8. Councillor Alexander, you have the opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions, Councillor. Thank you. Leslie, you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Marvin, for your reply. Can I be assured, therefore, that the land that runs between Frenchley Park Road in my ward and the motorway will be used for agricultural purposes, because it is some of the best agricultural land in the country. It is in the green belt, and it's probably recognised as being the biggest piece of land in the ward that could be used for this purpose, and short of digging up a park, and I'm sure you don't want the aggravation any more than I do of that happening.
No, you can be assured. That's just to correct. We're talking about the Blue Finger land. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's being protected, Leslie, and I will share actually that as we've pursued our ring of park and rides, there was one proposal put forward to put the park and ride on the Blue Finger land, and we're saying that's not going to happen. So no, it's safe under our watch. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councillor, do you have a second supplementary question?
No, that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That concludes members' questions. I will now take statements received. In terms of procedure, I would remind members of the following. A maximum of 1 minute should be allowed for the presentation of each statement. There shall be no debate on the statement, and they shall be referred to the member for his consideration. Statements will be dealt in order of receipt. We'll move to the first statement, which comes from Councillor Breckles. You have 1 minute, Councillor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, my Lord Mayor. I mean, this is about the launch of the consultation, which is open until 31st of January, on the crossing improvements that I've worked with officers over the last summer and autumn to put together on the end of Common Road known as Suicide Corner. It's where the River Avon Trail sort of stops, goes onto the road and then rejoins again. And what I really like about the scheme that we've come up with is that it can be improved later. So when this is actually within budget for £26,000, and it's providing textile, proper textured crossings with bollards, so it really improves.
You have 20 seconds left, Councillor.
And we can then expand it when funds allow. We can add in speed tables and without wasting what we've already done now. So I just encourage my constituents to support it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd now like to move on to statement number 2. Councillor Lake, you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the statement speaks for itself, and I hope it's taken for what it is. And of course, I can and do feel comfortable asking officers or the administration outside of this meeting for updates. And I know I'm also able to email the police, who usually do give us some update on such serious incidents. But I'm sure all of us who saw the footage of a young woman being restrained by police on a Bristol bus in front of her toddler were disturbed by what we saw. And I haven't taken to social media as many might have expected or wanted me to. So I did feel I should at least raise it here in this public way, because it is important to me, and I'm sure many of us. And so I'm just asking
20 seconds
to be
left.
kept informed of the outcome of the police and First Bus investigations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the statements which we note, and I now refer to the Mayor for his consideration, information. that ends this session, and we will now conclude. And we will now convene. Sorry, we'll convene again.